This is Chapter 5 Loops, Programming Exercise 7, Financial Application, Compute Future Tuition. So, suppose the tuition for university is $10,000 this year, and increase it 5% every year. In 1 year, the tuition will be $10,500. Write a program that displays the tuition in 10 years and a total cost of 4 years worth of tuition after the 10th year. Alright, so let's have our calculation, right? Now, the first year is going to be $10,000 with the tuition increase of 5%, and that will be the first year. And the next following year, the tuition is $10,500 with an increase of 5% of that. So that will keep going on and repeating. So from year 1 to year 10, we're going to display the tuition and the tuition increase, and that will be displayed to the user. And behind the scene, afterward, we're going to calculate for the total cost between year 11 to year 14. We're going to add the sum, and then we're going to display it. So that is what we're going to do. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, right? All right, so let's see. So the first thing I want to do is to create all the necessary variables, right? And in this case, one of the variables will of course be our starting tuition, which will be $10,000. And then there's also the tuition increase. Tuition increase, which is 0.05% or 5%, right? And lastly, the sum of tuition, which we're going to use this variable to calculate for the last 4 years after the 10th year of the tuition. All right, so now that we have all the variables that we need out of the way, let's print out a table. Let's make it look a little nice. Now for this table, I did this in a previous exercise, so I don't want to do it again and have to, so I'm just going to copy over from it. It's pretty straightforward, right? Just a bunch of lines, new line, tabs, pipes, and underscore. So I'm just going to run that and show you it's just a print statement, which is this right here. No logic, no nothing, right? So you're not really missing out on anything with this copy paste here. Now, the next thing that we actually have to figure out is to be able to display the tuition, the year, and the tuition cost year by year, right? So that's the important part, all right? So let's actually get visual on that since I didn't really go over it. So we have to make sure to get the actual cost of tuition year by year. Every year increased by 5%. So we have to be able to mark that cost for the first year and then show the increase for the following year. So increase of 5% for $10,000 will be $10,500. So that'll be for year 2, and so on and so forth. Every year it'll increase a little bit at a time, right? And it has to increase accordingly, or the increase of 5% of the previous year. So we have to make sure we're doing that and also displaying it correctly. So that's where this part comes in. Now what I'm going to do, actually, now that I think about it, I do have one more variable called year equals, let's do 14, right? So that's the number of years I'm going to run in our loop. In this case, it's going to be a for loop, which will be much simpler for me to utilize. We're going to start at year 1, so I equals 1. As long as I is less than or equals to year, right? And then I plus plus. So the reason for that is because we want it to run for 14 years. So it's going to run from 1 to the year, which is 14. And for now, I don't think I'll need to change it. So I'm just going to make it final. All right. And let's see. So is the tuition increase is also going to stay the same. But since I can't write it right here, because that will affect all the other variables, I'm going to have to create a separate variable for it. So I'm going to cut that out Now paste it down here. Final. Let's see. It will be. Let's make it a double. All right. So these are our final. If I remember correctly, I think finals should be all capital. Actually, I'm not sure about that. I don't remember. Either way, all right. So we have our year. Achieve constant tuition. Yeah. Capitalized tuition increase. All right. There we go. And inside the for loop, that's where we're going to run our logic. So we're only going to want to display the first 10 years to the user. I'm going to have an if right here and say as long as I is less than or equal to 10, then do what's inside the for loop. Now inside the for loop, I'm going to print out a little bit of logic, a little bit of a table, make it look nice, make it easier to see. Now let's see, plus I, and then plus /t pipe /t $. Okay, so let's see how that looks like before I continue. All right, not bad. So it's going to display the year, and then it's going to display the tuition. All right. Now another thing I want to do is actually I want to pad the I. So what I'm going to do is create a string. Just call it padded year equals string.format and %202. Oops, no, I mean 0202 D, and then right here the other parameter it takes in is the integer that you want to pad. In this case it's the I. It's going to convert that to a string and store it in here. All right, and instead of having I here now I have padded here. So let's run that again. What I really want to do is just add another, just make it nice looking. So 01, 02 all the way to 10, right? Because we're using 2 digits. And of course, lastly, the bottom part for, so system.out.println, paste that in here. All right, so we got the easy part done. Now do the hard part, which is to figure out the tuition costs. Okay, and then display that for year 1 all the way to 10. All right, so let's see. Now let me double check. Let me make sure I understand what it's asking. It says that in 1 year the tuition will be 10,500. So that, does that mean the first, so suppose the tuition for university is $10,000 this year, and then I assume next year increased by 10,000, right? So if that's the case, where's my, if that's the case, then what I could do is to display the tuition first. And in this case, I do want to also use the decimal format. Decimal format equals new decimal format. Show the number and show the decimal case in 2 decimal places, right? Because our cents goes by up to 100 cents, so just 2 decimal places. So that's just to display the cost of the tuition. All right, so let's continue from here. Plus, and we're going to now use let's see, decimal format dot format, and we're going to have the tuition. So tuition, tuition plus times equals, yeah. So let's run that first. So let me just get a nice visual on how that looks like. All right, so you start off by paying $10,000, and then let me just /t, maybe another /t, and that will. All right, now to actually display how much it cost. Okay, so we do want to increase it by 5% every year. So all we have to do is to take the tuition plus equals to tuition times tuition. Oh, no, is that tuition? What did I call it? I call it tuition increase. Tuition increase. So this is multiplying the tuition by 5%. You add that 5% into the current tuition, and that will allow us to display for the next year's tuition. But let me double check, make sure this is correct. And here we go. So the first year is $10,000, right? And then next year, it increased by 5%. So year 2 is now $10,500. And then year 3 is 5% increase of $10,500, which is $11,000.25. So this keeps going on, and now we have all 10 years. So every year we have the cost, and then it shows the cost for the following year with that 5% increase from the previous year, all the way to the 10th year, where in 10 years it practically, with 5% increased by $5,513.28. So that increased by 50% in 10 years. So that's pretty crazy, right? If you just increase by 5% every year, that's a lot of money just to go to school, right? So after we calculate for 10 years, next we want to calculate for the next remaining 4 years. So our total is 14. We want to calculate the cost between year 11 to year 14. So I'll just say if I is greater than 10, or simply saying, you could put an else right here, else, right? Because if I is not less than or equal to 10, then it must be greater than 10. So you don't have to do no if, you could just do an else. So either way works, as long as you make sure to check, right? Else, now we want to calculate for the sum. So we grab sum of tuition plus equal to the tuition. All right. Okay, and finally we display it. So let's display it right here, right after this. Tuition total for year 11 to 14. Okay, sum of tuition, and let's see how that looks like. All right, and here we go. So, I would like to pad it actually. Let's see, where is the decimal format, .format. There we go, looks a little nicer. And here we go. So for the year, we have our little table here that shows tuition for the next 10 years and the cost of the tuition. And then we did a calculation behind the scene that calculates year 11, 12, 13, and 14, and the sum of it, which is going to be 70,000, right? So it's approximately, let's say 15,000 times 4, and then with all the interest every year. So that's pretty much this right here, $70,000 for 4 years of tuition. All right, so that will be it for this exercise. I'm just going to do one last quick review of what we did here, and we're good, right? So we know that tuition for the first year starts at 10,000. we know that it will increase every year by 5%, which is why we use the double, because it will increase by 5%. So it will change from a integer to a floating point number, right? Floating point number with decimal places. And because of that, that's why we use double, and we know that it will be changing, which is why we won't be using the final keyword. We also want to calculate for the sum of the total tuition between year 11 to 14, and if you want to calculate the sum, you have to make sure to initialize it at the beginning, or else this program would not know, or Java would not know to be able to, or how to use this variable if it doesn't have, if it hasn't been initialized. So for now, we set it to 0, because the sum of tuition, if you haven't gone to school yet, then you don't have a need to pay for school. So that's why it's 0 by default. Next, we create a variable using byte keyword, because byte takes very little memory, the least amount of memory for any data types that use numericals, right? So we use byte because we are not going to go for hundreds to thousands of years. So we could use something small and be more memory efficient. All right, and we set it to 14 because that's the amount of years we're going to go through. We're not planning to change it. If we do change it, we could just change it from here. We don't have to change it throughout the whole program, right? In this case, it's only used once, but if you use it many times, right, then you will have to change it multiple places. But since we set it to a variable, we just have to change this variable, and it's used throughout, and it's changed throughout the whole program. And we made it final because we don't have to change it after we change it once. Next, we have tuition increase. So the question for this exercise says that we're going to increase by 5%. Of course, let's say you want to change it to 5% and see the results. By just changing it here, you don't have to change it anywhere else, right? You don't have to change it here. And it looks like that's it, right? But because you just change it here, you don't have to change it in more than any other places. And then you could quickly see the results afterward, right? So it makes a big difference, right? From 70,000 to like 53,000 because you changed the interest. It really, really does make a big difference, right? But anyway, and then decimal formats just so I could manipulate how I want you, the user, to be able to see or view it, and it is more cleaner and easier on the eyes instead of having a whole long string of decimals. So format, show the number, and show 2 decimal places. And this is just to display the table, the first part of the table, and the rest is the for loop. So starting with the for loop, I want to start at year 1, so I put 1 right here. Of course, I could do 0, but then I'll have to add extra code in the inside the loop to make up for that 0 starting at 0. So you have to make sure however you want your code to be, or however you want to start. You have to make sure you start it accordingly and format it properly. So I start year 0, and I'm going to end at the variable year, which is 14, and increment it by 1 for every loop. Of course, if I want to, I could always increase it by 2, by 3, right? You don't have to do it by 1. You are able to manipulate however you want, as long as it's acceptable for this loop. And of course, this padding is just, once again, to add an extra 0 to the beginning. That's more for visual than anything. Does not affect the output, the main result, which is our interest every year, or how much increase every year. Now, for the main part, the if and the else right here. The if says that if I is less than or equals to 10, perform this. Else, perform this. So what it is saying is, if it's less than 10, display everything onto the table. If it's greater than 10, do a calculation of how much it will cost between the number that's greater than 10 and less than or equal to year. Calculate all that and then display it down here. And of course, every year, for every loop, that's a new year for me. Every time it increase, every time it run through, that's a year. So every year I have to make sure I increase the tuition costs. To do that, I make sure to create a variable that stores the cost of the tuition multiple, add that with the tuition increase and store it back into the variable. That way I could reuse that variable to show for the following year. And finally, of course, ends up showing it here in this statement, in this print line statement here. And this is what we end up seeing. So hopefully all of that makes sense. And if not, let me know, and we'll see if we could elaborate a little further.